Welcome back to Classic Nostalgia Shows. Tonight, we're stepping away from sitcoms and television nostalgia and entering something far more haunting, the mud-filled trenches of World War I.
Oh, that's a shift, but a really important one. I'm already intrigued, John. World War I is such a pivotal moment in history and honestly in cinema too, right?
Absolutely, Annie, because in 1930, audiences saw something they had rarely witnessed before in cinema. A war film that didn't glorify battle, didn't celebrate heroism, and didn't present war as adventure. Instead, it showed fear, exhaustion, trauma, and the destruction of an entire generation.
And that film, of course, was All Quiet on the Western Front. I mean, even the title sends shivers down your spine. It's so stark and understated, but it implies so much, doesn't it?
It really does. And nearly a century later, it's still considered one of the most important anti-war films ever made. But the question is, why was this movie so groundbreaking? Why did it shock audiences around the world? And why does its message still feel powerful today?
Those are big questions, John, because when you think about it, there have been countless war films since. But this one consistently comes up in discussions about the genre's most impactful entries.
Tonight, we're exploring the importance of All Quiet on the Western Front and how one black and white film truly changed war movies forever. So settle in, and let's step back into one of the darkest chapters of the 20th century. To understand its impact, we first need to understand the world that created it. World War I devastated Europe. Millions of soldiers died in trenches stretching across the continent.
It's almost impossible to grasp the scale of that devastation, isn't it? Entire towns vanished, families were destroyed, and a generation of young men never came home. It just wiped out so much.
Exactly. For many people at the time, the war shattered old ideas about honor and glory in combat. Before World War I, war was often romanticized. People imagined heroic cavalry charges, patriotic sacrifice, noble victories. It was seen through this almost chivalric lens.
Right, like something out of an epic poem. You fought for king and country, and it was glorious, even in death. There was this narrative of noble struggle. But then WWI happened, and it completely tore that narrative apart.
Trench warfare changed everything. Machine guns, artillery, gas attacks, mud-filled trenches. Death became industrialized. It wasn't about a heroic individual charge, it was about dehumanized slaughter on an unimaginable scale.
And soldiers returned home, if they returned at all, emotionally scarred in ways no one had really anticipated or understood. The world had changed permanently, and people were grappling with this new, brutal reality.
That shift in public consciousness, that deep wound across an entire continent, is the context for our film. Because before the movie came the novel. In 1929, German veteran Erich Maria Remarque published the book All Quiet on the Western Front.
And it became an international sensation almost immediately, right? I remember reading it in school, and even decades later it hits you with such force, you can only imagine what it was like for people living so close to the war.
Exactly. Why? Because it told the war from the perspective of ordinary young soldiers, not generals, not politicians, teenagers. The story follows Paul Bäumer and his classmates as they enthusiastically enlist after being pressured by patriotic speeches.
That's the kicker, isn't it? They're just kids, full of youthful idealism, caught up in the fervor, thinking they're doing something noble and grand. They're basically coerced into joining, but it's framed as patriotism.
Right. But once they reach the front, their illusions collapse, quickly. The novel described war not as glorious, but as terrifying, meaningless, and deeply tragic. Remarque didn't pull any punches.
It's brutal in its honesty, and that's why readers around the world connected with its honesty, especially veterans who had experienced the horrors firsthand. I bet for them it was like finally someone was telling their story without all the romantic fluff.
It was validation, a voice for their trauma. And then, a year later, Hollywood took a massive risk. In 1930, Lewis Milestone directed the film adaptation.
That must have been a huge leap for Hollywood at the time. I mean, you've just explained how war was typically portrayed. This was a radical departure.
It truly was. At the time, Hollywood war films often still contained patriotic elements or adventure themes. Audiences expected a certain kind of story, a reassuring narrative. But All Quiet on the Western Front was different from almost everything they had seen before.
So, how did it diverge? What made it such a groundbreaking film for its era?
The film focused heavily on fear, exhaustion, psychological trauma, and meaningless death. There are no glamorous battlefield victories. No triumphant speeches, no glorious ending. Instead, viewers watch young men slowly lose their innocence, their hope, their very humanity.
That realism must have been incredibly shocking, especially because, as you mentioned, the wounds of World War I were still so fresh. This wasn't some historical epic from centuries ago, this was recent memory.
Many viewers personally knew people who had fought in the war. Some had lost fathers, brothers, or sons. It hit very, very close to home. It wasn't distant history.
I can only imagine sitting in that theater, maybe with a family member who had served, and seeing that raw, unfiltered portrayal on screen. It must have been an overwhelming experience.
And one reason the movie became so influential was its unyielding realism in the battle scenes. They felt chaotic and frightening. Soldiers scream in terror. Artillery explodes endlessly. Men die suddenly and randomly. The trenches feel claustrophobic and miserable.
It's not stylized, it's just pure, terrifying chaos. And the sheer scale of the set pieces they managed in 1930, with the technology available then, is astounding. It truly immerses you in that nightmare.
It truly does. And importantly, the film doesn't focus on enemy hatred. French and German soldiers alike are portrayed as victims of the same terrible system.
That's huge. That idea was deeply controversial at the time, especially in countries still shaped by intense nationalism after the war. People wanted to dehumanize the other side.
But the film insisted on something radical. Ordinary soldiers on both sides suffered equally. That humanistic message became one of the film's greatest strengths, allowing audiences to empathize beyond national borders.
It's a testament to the power of art, really, that it can transcend those political lines and remind us of our shared humanity, even in the most horrific circumstances.
One of the most powerful ideas in All Quiet on the Western Front is the destruction of youth. The main characters begin the story as idealistic students. By the end, they're emotionally broken. The film suggests that war steals not only lives, but futures. Dreams, innocence, identity.
That's what really gets me. It's not just the physical toll, it's the internal devastation. They go in as boys, and if they survive, they come out as empty shells, unable to reconnect with the world they left behind.
There's a heartbreaking scene where Paul realizes he can no longer reconnect with civilian life. Home no longer feels like home. The innocence is gone. The worldview is shattered. How do you go back to being a student after that?
You don't. That emotional disconnection became one of the defining portrayals of war trauma in cinema. And decades later, veterans from later wars would describe similar feelings. It's that universal truth that makes it so potent.
It really is. That's one reason the movie still resonates today. Its emotional truth feels universal. Now, you'd think a film this honest would be universally praised, but its anti-war message made it controversial almost immediately.
I can definitely see that. When something challenges deeply held beliefs, especially about national pride, people react. Some audiences praised it as honest and courageous, but others attacked it fiercely, right?
Oh, absolutely. In Germany especially, nationalist groups hated the film. Political extremists disrupted screenings. Some theaters even reported violent protests. Can you imagine?
It's wild to think about. Why such a strong reaction, though? What was it about this film that really threatened them?
Because the film challenged heroic narratives about war. It questioned nationalism and blind patriotism. And during a time of rising political extremism in Europe, particularly with the rise of the Nazis, that made the movie dangerous to certain groups. It undermined their entire recruitment narrative.
So it wasn't just a film, it was perceived as a political statement that directly countered their ideology. And eventually, the Nazi regime banned both the novel and the film, didn't they? That alone says a great deal about its power.
It speaks volumes, Annie. If a film is so powerful that a totalitarian regime feels the need to ban it, you know it's hit a nerve. And it's difficult to overstate how influential All Quiet on the Western Front became in cinema.
Oh, I totally agree. You can see its fingerprints everywhere. Before this movie, war films often focused heavily on victory, heroism, patriotic spectacle. But this film was a turning point.
After it, filmmakers increasingly explored trauma, psychological damage, moral ambiguity, and the profound human cost of war. It opened the door for a whole new approach to the genre.
You can see its influence so clearly. Films like Paths of Glory, Platoon, Saving Private Ryan, even recent ones like 1917, they all have that DNA, that gritty realism, that focus on the soldier's perspective, not the general's.
Exactly. It really laid the groundwork for modern anti-war cinema. And let's not forget, it was also a black and white film. The black and white cinematography adds enormous emotional weight to the film.
Oh, absolutely. The muddy trenches, the smoke, the exhausted faces of young soldiers, everything feels so stark and raw in black and white. It strips away distractions.
Black and white imagery often strips scenes down to pure emotion and contrast, and in war films especially, that can create incredible intensity. You're forced to focus on the human element, the grimy reality.
I think it also makes it feel more timeless, almost like a historical document. Even modern audiences used to color cinema often find older black and white war films surprisingly immersive, because the absence of color somehow makes the horror feel more authentic almost.
It can indeed, Annie. It makes it feel less like entertainment and more like a visceral experience. So, the big question remains. Why does All Quiet on the Western Front still matter nearly 100 years later?
That's the enduring power of it, isn't it? Because sadly, its message remains relevant. Every generation continues facing war somewhere in the world.
And the film reminds viewers of something many governments and leaders often forget. The people who suffer most are usually the young. Ordinary soldiers, ordinary families. It's easy for politicians to talk about strategy and numbers, but the film brings it back to the individual.
It humanizes the cost. The movie refuses to reduce war to statistics or politics. Instead, it forces audiences to see individuals, human beings. That emotional focus gives the film lasting power. It's not just a historical relic, it's a living, breathing warning.
Perhaps the greatest achievement of All Quiet on the Western Front is that it refused to turn suffering into entertainment. Even today, many war movies balance anti-war themes with action spectacle, often glorifying the combat even while decrying the war.
That's a really important distinction. This film doesn't do that. It consistently emphasizes fear, loss, waste, and tragedy. There's no thrill to the fighting, only despair.
Its famous final moments remain devastating because they feel so small and meaningless. No grand victory, no triumphant music, just silence and loss. That honesty is why the film continues to endure, why it resonates with new generations every time they discover it.
It's a powerful silence, though, one that speaks volumes about the futility of it all. It's a gut punch, not a celebration.
All Quiet on the Western Front was more than just a movie. It became a warning, a reminder of what happens when nationalism, propaganda, and war consume an entire generation. Nearly a century later, its message still echoes through cinema history.
And while technology has changed dramatically since 1930, the emotional truth at the center of the film remains timeless. It's a classic not just for its age, but for its unwavering message.
Thanks for joining me tonight on Classic Nostalgia Shows. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a comment sharing your thoughts on classic war films, and let me know which legendary movie or television topic we should explore next.
Yes, please do. We love hearing from you. And if you haven't seen All Quiet on the Western Front, the original 1930 version, I highly recommend seeking it out. It's an experience you won't forget.
Until next time, keep the classics alive.